The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, this is my last day here in Texas. As many of you guys know, I've been here in Texas for 5 weeks, so by the time you see this, I'll already be back home. But right now, it's my last day in Texas, so I'm in the hotel room, just enjoy my last couple of moments here, because it's been a very fruitful and productive 5 weeks here. But listen, I wanted to talk about something interesting because I was having a conversation the other day with my main man, 50 Gram, one of my best friends in the world, my boy Felipe. Felipe and I were having a conversation about boxing. And as we were having a conversation about boxing, we were talking about, he was telling me, he was going through the boxing news on his phone, and he was relaying the information to me that your boy, all right, Bolton, England's very own, Amir Khan, was talking about fighting Kell Brook again. And this has been conversation that we hear once or twice a year in boxing from Amir Khan or from Kell Brook. And that fight has long been expired. At one point in time, that was a promising matchup between two of the top 10 best welterweights in the world and two of the most exciting welterweights in the world. That's why that fight was so big at one point, because you had Amir Khan, the incendiary fast speed, hand speed of Amir Khan with the boxing smarts, the amateur pedigree, all blended to get together. You had the force in boxing that was Amir Khan, one of the top premier welterweights in the world. You had him on one side, and then on the other side, you had Kell Brook, a boxer puncher with one of the best straight right hands in the sport, coming out of that Sheffield gym, the Ingle gym, the same gym that Prince Nassim came from, and he looked to be on his way to becoming not just a world champion, but probably the next great fighter to come out of Britain. And, obviously with his career, he was horribly mismanaged by Eddie Hearn. He took a lot of fights he shouldn't have taken, and it really prevented him from maximizing what should have been a much more fruitful and better career. So these are two guys that at one point in time were at the top of this weight class. They were world class. And since time has went on, they've both been beaten up in embarrassing fashion. I mean, Kell Brook got beat up in embarrassing fashion by Triple G, broke his eye socket, had his eye socket broken by Errol Spence. Same thing goes when he fought Crawford. Khan got knocked out more times than we can count. So both these guys are nowhere near the top anymore. That much is certain. But you have Amir Khan, who for all these years, and I'm bringing this fight up to bring a point back home. So just bear with me, because this might be a bit of a long-winded video. But I'm bringing this fight up because this fight between Amir Khan and Kell Brook, which never happened, is the perfect example. I can't think of a much more perfect example of what happens in boxing when you get two fighters, or even just one fighter, who is too ego-driven to make the fight happen when it's supposed to freaking happen. Okay? Let's backtrack. And let's go back to 2013, 2014, all those years, 2015, when that fight was really supposed to happen, okay? So you had Amir Khan, who was, in that case, at that particular time, the A side. He was a bigger name. He was more well-known. He boxed as an amateur for Great Britain, won a silver medal at the age of 17, had an Adidas sponsorship before he even threw a punch in the professional ranks. I mean, Amir Khan was big time. He was big time, people. And he had been world champion. He had been involved in some big fights, not just in the UK, but he had been involved in big fights in America. He was becoming one of the biggest stars in boxing at the time that fight was supposed to happen. You had Kell Brook, who didn't have the amateur exploits or pedigree of Amir Khan, but he looked to be a fighter that was on the rise, and he looked to have the style and the attributes that were all wrong for Amir Khan. And these two did not like each other. These two made that very clear when they were on Sky Sports. And this was a fight that was supposed to happen. So when Amir Khan was first asked about this fight, he first said, go ahead and beat Matthew Hatton, and I'll fight you. So Kell Brook beats Matthew Hatton. He didn't, and Amir Khan didn't fight him. Then Amir Khan said to Kell Brook, get a world title. So then Kell Brook gets a world title. Then what happens when he beats when he gets a world title against Sean Porter? Then he says, "Oh well, I'm the bigger star. He needs to take a certain percentage to fight me." Does any of this sound familiar? Does any of this sound familiar to what's going on here in America? Because Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence is the American version of Amir Khan versus Kell Brook. And if these two, or if these one, and I'm speaking to Errol Spence, don't get their shit together and make this fight happen very soon, and I mean very soon, these two will have the same fate that Amir Khan and Kell Brook faced. You know, they're going to be two guys that were once at the top of the division, creme de la creme, you know, up there. I mean, I would say both these guys are probably, both these guys are at a higher level than Khan and Brook were, but it's the same principle. Two guys that were world class. It was a big fight. It was something that a lot of people wanted to see. And you had one guy, you know, going back to going back to Khan Brook and likening and using the analogy to Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Amir Khan is Errol Spence. Kell Brook is Terence Crawford. Amir Khan, like Errol Spence, is the Olympian with who was the bigger star in terms of sales and I guess, you know, fanfare, you know. In terms of his brand recognition, he's the bigger name. Khan was bigger than Brook. The same way, brand recognition wise, sales wise, Spence is bigger than Crawford. But neither one, just like Spence is here in America, Khan was not a big enough of a star at that time to be making the kind of demands he's making. But what I will say though is Amir Khan was a bigger star in the UK than Errol Spence is here in America. That much is for certain, because I mean, Errol Spence didn't have no endorsement deals after he won the Olympics because he didn't even win a medal. So, you know, it's different. But it's the same principle. You have one guy, two guys in Khan and Spence, both Olympians, both selling more tickets, both are the bigger draws, but both showed, for whatever reason, a reluctancy to fight the guy that everybody wanted to see them fight, who, you know, in the case of, you know, and Terence Crawford is just like the guy he just beat, Kell Brook. Kell Brook didn't have the name value of an Amir Khan. He wasn't selling the tickets like an Amir Khan, but he was very much on the rise, and he was very much a guy that, you know, had the style to beat him. You know, we knew Amir Khan was chinny. We knew Amir Khan was very fast, but after you get past the speed, there really wasn't much there with him. He didn't have a lot of dimensions to his boxing skill set, so it would have been a fight that a lot of people favored Kell Brook, and I would have picked Kell Brook. And if they fight, I'm still picking Kell Brook. Obviously, with Crawford, it's a lot different now because Terence Crawford isn't a guy that's on the rise. He's a guy that's, you know, arguably the pound fighter in boxing, been undisputed champion, scale weight classes, but he finds himself in 2021 in a similar position that Kell Brook was finding himself in 2013, 2014, 2015. So these guys can never come to an agreement, and that fight at one time would have been one of the biggest fights in the history of British boxing. And now, if it happens, it'll just be a fight that, you know, would barely, maybe it would fill out the O2 Arena. Maybe it would sell 20,000 tickets at best in the UK. But like these guys, Khan and Brook, didn't strike when the iron was hot, and now that fight is past its expiration date. And Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, I mean, there's still a small window for the fight to happen, but they have to strike while the iron's hot, because if one of these guys takes a loss, if it's Spence losing his next fight or Crawford losing his next fight, these guys are in big trouble. This fight's not going to have that same luster it once did, you know, similar to the same way Anthony Joshua and Wilder happened. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say, man. Like, this fight, I was thinking about it, and I'm so happy me and Felipe had that conversation, because I was sitting here and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, man, this fight between Crawford and Spence has a chance of being like Khan versus Brook, the American version. And that's not a good thing. You don't ever want to be, if you're two fighters in a mega fight, you don't ever want to be compared to Amir Khan versus Kell Brook, because that fight didn't even happen. Shit didn't happen with that fight. So my thing is this, you know, Amir Khan-Kell Brook, you know, I was a huge fan of Amir Khan at one point. I'm not anymore. But Amir Khan's been in the media recently talking about how he wants that fight to happen. You know, that now they both have went ahead and did everything. They've both been world champion. They both did this. They both did that. And now was the perfect time for the fight to happen. Why? Because you're irrelevant? Because you got dropped by Samuel Vargas and you can't beat nobody worth a damn in the welterweight division anymore? Is that why you want to fight Kell Brook now? Why didn't you want to fight Kell Brook when it mattered? When it meant something outside of the UK? Because there was a time, I've been on YouTube a long time and I remember this perfectly. There was a distinct time in boxing history where this fight between Kell Brook and Amir Khan, it didn't just mean something domestically. It wasn't just some sort of domestic British dust-up. No, it meant something to boxing fans at large. And my thing is this, that fight might still mean something in the UK, but I question it, and my British fans can let me know, because they'd have a better pulse on this than I would, because I'm an American, I live in America. But like, would that fight even mean that much in the UK anymore? Because I'm not even sure it would. You know? There was a point in time where that fight would have meant so much to boxing fans at large. Because I remember it. There used to be a debate here on YouTube between even some of the American channels. You had American channels like my boy, shout out to him. I haven't talked to him in a while, but Shady Slim. Shady Slim used to say, he's a big Amir Khan fan. That's his guy. He rides for Amir Khan. He used to tell everybody Amir Khan gonna beat the shit out of Kell Brook, that Kell Brook ain't nothing, you know? And there are people in America that liked Kell Brook's style. Like when Kell Brook was in his prime, I loved the style. Still do, because every now and then when he fights less opposition, you still see glimpses of the old Kell Brook. But I mean, he's got a he's got a style that American fight fans like. Kell Brook, you know, he's got a really good jab, and an amazing straight right hand, the chocolate brownie as he calls it. And it just, the fact that we didn't get to see the speed of Amir Khan versus the boxer puncher timing of Kell Brook in their primes is one of the greatest tragedies of this last decade of boxing. And I was just thinking about how it might be an even greater tragedy if Crawford Spence never happens, because right now the way it's going, if these guys never fight each other, or if like Spence prices himself out, or if Crawford loses to Pacquiao, or if Spence loses to Ugas, then this will be an even greater tragedy than Khan Brook. And that's saying something, because that fight is a tragedy and a half if I've ever seen one in my life. So yeah, man, I just wanted to kind of spitball and give you guys my thoughts on a conversation I had. And I would like to know what you guys think. You know, do you guys think there's any similarities to Crawford and Spence and Brook and Khan? Because I think there is. Although they're at both these fighters are at different stages than Khan and Brook were when their fight was supposed to happen, I can see the similarities, because you have one guy who said he wanted to fight, who was the bigger draw, but every time the guy that he said he wanted to fight did what he asked him to do, he continued to move the goalposts until the fight no longer became of interest to the public. So I think there's a lot of similarities. But you guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you take the time to subscribe. And like I say in every single one of these videos, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just a kid from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.